Good evening. Welcome, Arvind and Shishir. Thank you for joining us. So the topic we had today came after a lot of thought. We've seen the current economic scenario, and three of us were in a discussion. And Arvind was the one who brought up this famous quote from Peter Drucker, which says that organization has only one purpose, which is to create customers, and two main functions, which is marketing and innovation. Everything else is cost. Now, when we put that in today's context, when we see a lot of companies struggling to make revenue, go back to what the revenue was earlier, trying to understand the customer behavior in the new shift which has happened, right? Almost every business across the globe is impacted by this.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sushant, for setting this up, and great to just have this conversation, really. Just a very quick background. I've got about 20 plus years in marketing. My approach is looking at it from customer-centric viewpoint first. So customer first, and then everything else follows. It's diagnosis, strategy, followed by tactics. So that's the usual approach I come up with, and happy to talk about it.
What I do these days is lead easy problem solving along with Sushant.
So the first question to you, Arvind, in today's scenario, with the upheaval across the world, which seems to be never ending as of this point, how have you seen the evolution in marketing as a discipline?
So the pandemic is just a moment in time, right? So the way I'm looking at it is the changes were happening pre-pandemic. So the world was going online for the past 20 years, and slowly and gradually every year we saw a bit more shift towards online space as a channel medium. And what the pandemic has done is it's basically put that on steroids. The change is accelerated. So what was happening before is happening today, but you compress the timeline. What would have happened over 5, 7, 10 years is now happening within 10 months. So that's the change I've seen. And let me articulate with in a different way. So pre-pandemic, if you were to go back to say early 2000s, 2001, 2002, and if you were to look at e-commerce as a general way of doing business, e-commerce was, again, not specific to industry, but what was averaging about 1% growth every year. So it started off with, say, 2% of your business in a certain sector was coming from e-commerce channels. It went to 3%, typically 1% growth on an average every year, leading up to 2019. So in end of 2019, we were looking at about a 19 to 20% percentage of business coming through e-commerce. Now, in these 10, 12 months now, that has grown by percentage a month. So we've seen 10 to 12 to 15% growth across industry segments. So it's really accelerated. And this is happening in every space, right? Not just e-commerce. I mean, e-commerce is, of course, but you look at any other industry as well, you've seen the acceleration upwards or downwards in a very steep trajectory in these 10 months. So it's just, hasten the pace, in my opinion.
Thriving and utilizing the opportunity that's out there. So one of the biggest pieces that we've been talking about or reading about is also the fact that if you realized how you brought the company together during this pandemic period, especially as CEOs, CXOs, leaders, vertical heads, and how you stayed true to the path of getting stuff done. So you motivated, you gave a vision, you stayed with the people, and you got stuff done. And you were completely engaged, and everything else was secondary. So innovation and doing something different was brought up at the fore, and rest everything was delegated to the next rung. So the first rung activity, when it became a first rung activity, it really changed the paradigms for many industries, including, like I said, some of the local shop owners who were faster at managing the change than many of the biggest players out there who took their time to set up the processes because of the massive scale that they were operating at. But the shop owner did do so at a jiffy and was delivering stuff very, very quickly the next day itself in the houses. So fantastic opportunity for people, leaders to reflect back if they did manage to make a change during the pandemic. What did they do? and how could they create that situation, not the pandemic, but the situation for innovation in their own company and lead the way forward.
Okay, perfect.
Long game, and you got to play the short game. So if you have very patient investors who are willing to sit for the next 10 years with no returns, I don't know of many investors like that, then you can continue to play the long game and forget about the quarter, forget about the month and the year, right? But the reality is you got to deliver in the short run. You got to survive as a business and thrive as a business, to Shishir's point, but also got to have a point of view in the long game, right? So, and there are these professors, Field and Bennett. Field and Bennett have this really great study that they've done over the past 10, 12 years. And they came up with a very robust summary, yet something that can be explained in 2 slides, literally 2 slides. And they call it the long and short of it. And this is what they say. They say there are activation. Marketing is about activation, which is, think about activation as performance marketing, could be digital marketing, paid search marketing, could be sales activation, sales promotion, all the things that you turn on, and then the business goes up or the revenue goes up, and then you turn it off, it drops down to the baseline. So those are short-term things that you got to do as a business. But you also got to think about the long run, which is the brand experience. You can call that product marketing, that is investing, innovating, and really coming up with a long vision of who you're trying to serve, the customers, and how you're going to serve them in the long run. And that is the brand experience. And that's a step change. You don't turn it on and turn it off. You keep it always on. And you don't see that it ever goes down. Once you build a brand in a reasonable time frame, it remains at that level till you again refocus on your customer and make another step change. So it goes, I mean, it's hard to visualize it, but it goes step by step going upwards. And they've studied 1,500 companies and across sectors over the past 15 years or so, 12 years, I think. And this is what they came up with. They said, you got to do the long, you got to play the long game, which is invest in your product, invest in your innovation and things like that for brand experience. And you got to do the short piece as well. You got to do both to see a meaningful change in the long run, which solves for your immediate quarter or immediate months or immediate years sustainability and profitability requirements, but also serves the consumer in the long run and does justice to them. So that's the long and short of it. So and again, I would really urge anyone who's interested, go look it up. It's called Long and Short of It, and it's a very interesting study that they've done. And that's really the way I look at marketing. You got to do both.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Shishir, same question. So when most of the companies or clients that we speak to, or I speak to, when they talk about innovation, it's either saying that it's the game of the big players, right? So the Microsoft, the Salesforce, the Google, the Facebook, or they also tend to look at that we are a single product company, and we do a certain thing, but we do it well. So there's not much room for innovation, especially when I look at something in the core manufacturing sector, right? They do one thing or maybe 2 things and they do it well. So given what we were discussing about stocks the other day, it's easy to open a Demat account and start to think that you are the next Warren Buffett or Jhunjhunwala. But when the reality strikes, you realize that you're just a small guy, right, with couple of thousands to spare. Now, if I were to break innovation from an SMB perspective, I have limited money, and there's a constant struggle of where do I park that money. How would you advise playing the innovation game from that perspective?
Well, what I'll do is I'll first go to what Bala was saying, and here is a saying that I came up a few days back that, look, either you can line up for the customer or the customer can line up for you. You can come up with a Me Too product, try and get a queue to reach out to the customer and push that product to the customer, naturally playing the pricing game or some bit of packaging game, or you can come up with something that the customer lines up to get from you. Having said that, to your question, which is is and if I were to read the question differently, is innovation about having loads of deep pockets to be able to sustain? Um, One of the definitions, I think you did talk about it, is it's about from an innovation perspective. It's not necessarily about, for example, getting the biggest design thinking expert to come and design the engine for you, especially if you're just making pistons for an engine and supplying it back to some big OEM guy or a car manufacturers. But the fact is also about that innovation is about changing paradigms. It's about letting that fixed thinking go and creating new value. So in that order, if you're happy-go-lucky and there is no fire, of course you wouldn't innovate. There is, just be happy, it's fine. But because for innovation, I was reading a few minutes back a book, and the book talked about to innovate, you need to die. And die here is taken metaphorically. Your old habits need to die. Your old thoughts need to die. Your old processes need to die. And you need to come up with something new. So unless you are ready to change as the leader of a team, of a large company, of a small company, unless you're ready to let go of your own thought processes and mindsets, innovation can't happen.
Okay.
I wanted to dig in a bit deeper into that, Shishir. You bring about a good point. I mean, there's this idea of having a breakthrough innovation, which is you got to kill your existing product processes, your thought process, or whatever that be that defines your category. And then you got to think ground up and build something, right? And there's certainly that innovation piece, which is creating a new category. And we see that happening every now and then, but not so frequently. And then there's this another innovation which happens every day, which is incremental in nature. It's not breakthrough. And that is sometimes overshadowed by those breakthrough once in a while innovation. So I think the way I'm looking at it is, especially for small to medium enterprises, it's really important, or for startups for that matter, it's really important that we think about incremental innovation. Not everything has to be breakthrough, because breakthrough comes at a price. And I'll give you an example from marketing aspect. If you were to create something breakthrough and you come up with a fabulous product, which really it's worth its weight in gold, but you first need to educate the customer about that need, because such a new category, you first need to spend inordinate amount of time, money, resources trying to educate the customer, getting them access. And that is a painfully long drawn process. And a lot of times we get enamored with the survivorship bias of companies that have created a category and super successful, and we want to be the Apples and Googles or whoever else of the world. But really, for small to medium enterprises, it is incredibly important that the founder or that core group remains passionate about incremental innovation, because the more focused you are, if you identified that this is my consumer group and they're the ones who are facing pain, facing a challenge, or are staring the ceiling at night wondering, man, how am I going to solve for this? And you figured out for those consumers a unique incremental way to make their life better in whatever way or product you're selling. That is where you truly add value as an SME, and certainly large corporations as well. But certainly when you're focusing on startups and small, think small. It doesn't have to be breakthrough, in my opinion. Just wanted to share that perspective, slightly differing from what you're sharing. I think both are important.
It's certainly, and one of the inhibitions of the habits that you need to break is not challenging the status quo or accepting what is out there. It's been going fine. I have 2 customers. They pay me X amount of money every month, and I supply Y amount of products to them every month, and Z amount of products get rejected every month, and this is laissez-faire. So yes, they will have to challenge status quo, and they'll have to accept the fact. And absolutely agree with you on the fact of if you're coming up with a category-breaking product. We have a customer like that, and we see the pain. They have the category-breaking product. The question is, how do you educate the customer? What is going to happen, or especially the target groups that they have in mind. And this is in healthcare, and we've discussed about that one earlier. But with category breaking products, it is also a pain of trying to educate the customer. And yes, that could be a deep pocket game. But the interesting thing today is if the idea is bright, you're passionate about it, there are people around with deep pockets to help you.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm reminded. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
You just spurring so many thoughts around this. I was having a chat with someone else, and they were talking about they're in the medical field, and this person really deals with the scientists, and scientists spend inordinate amount of time doing research, right? So putting information together, looking for information, reading about things. So the idea that this person came up with is, I've figured out a way to curate all of this content, which they're spending inordinate amount of time researching and finding out in one singular place. And it's like a repository. It's like Google for all things research and white papers, right? And at the face of it, it's like a brilliant idea. Man, this is going to be really hard. And the way she kind of walked me through it, I said, yeah, man, that makes total sense. But one of the things that was a struggle, I mean, it's a new category, assumingly, because it's a Google for white papers. So it's somewhat of a new category for a specific, vertical within the medical space. All right. So when she started to test this idea with a core group of beta customers, one of the things that came to realization was the scientists actually enjoy the process of research. They don't want to go to a one-stop place and find everything curated. They really don't. And this came about naturally or organically. And if you just launch the product without asking the customers or without doing that due diligence and beta, then you would think, why is my product not taking off? It's a brilliant product, but it's not taking off. But the actual fact is the scientists actually pride themselves in doing that research. That's what kind of gives them energy. And that's what sparks new ideas as well, because they're connecting the dots of different places, right? So it's amazing how a consumer thinks, and to your earlier point about design thinking and innovating, and how you think as a founder or product owner. You're so close to the product and passionate about it that it's hard for you to see the consumer side till you test it out.
Look, till Dewey wrote this came up with a white paper again in 1910 around creativity. Step number one he talked about was preparation. Step two was incubation. Step three was illumination, and step four was verification. So this whole incubation to elimination, it took about next 40 to 60 years coming to it, the creativity process. And even now, most scientific papers would also talk about this fact that how you need to let the idea rest and incubate and grow on its own. And I am a big believer on it. And I'll connect now and give it back to Sushant before he gets angry on us. Is the fact that if you're passionate about it, if you're thinking about it 24 hours a day, that idea will incubate, and you will think about different ways of doing something. Versus if you're not motivated enough, if your purpose is not sorted for you, if you don't believe in your founder's purpose, because that's his purpose and I am here to do a job, that ain't going to help you innovate. Sushant, back to you, my friend.
Okay. Perfect. Great. So we will take a quick pause. Audience, if there are questions that you would like to ask, either Arvind or Shishir, you can use the chat window, and we'll take a 30-second break. You can type it out, and I'll put the question to the speaker.
While we're waiting, this is one of the things I've discovered about this new medium, Zoom, Teams, whatever it is. I'm not as familiar with Teams, but Zoom certainly is. The power of this new medium. The power of the new medium is when you're face to face in a room and things like that, it's the conversation is asynchronous. One person talks, the other person listens, and so on. The beauty of this new medium is you can talk whilst you're talking. If an idea spurs, just drop that thought in the chat so that those questions keep surfacing. And that really, at least I find it really energizing, because there are so many things that are going on when you're listening to things. So my suggestion would be, if audience have any questions, keep dropping that in there and we'll try and address it.
Sure. Perfect. So my next question to both of you, and we will start with Shishir this time, is all that you said is good, and keeping this thing a little different.
For the first time, Sushant is agreeing to things we're saying. We should do this more often.
That is standard sarcasm. Just wait for this is a double whammy.
Yeah.
Wait for the
probably.
Okay. So the thing that we see in most of the webinars, and one of the reasons that we decided to come up with such series was, when I attend a webinar also, is it's good to get enamored. There is this thing, idea should incubate, etc. So there is part of what it should be, and then I go back to my real life of what it is, right? It's like, watching a great program on Netflix, or wherever, let's say Nat Geo for that matter, getting very enamored by whatever forest or deep oceans that they're saying, that they're showing. And then the moment that program is over, you step into your balcony and you realize, hey, I live in a concrete jungle. Right. So using that analogy, it's all good. But as a business owner, when I go back to my daily running, I see that I still have the same challenges. Right. Money is still short. I still don't have very innovative ideas, or for that matter, even incremental ideas. Right. Everybody wants to continue with the same sphere. So with that in mind, the question that I want to pose to you, Shishir, is, and the beauty that both of you bring together, when I had conversations with you earlier, is to break down the whole methodology or whole complexity into very, very small, easy to do steps, right? This is something that you can actually do. So, you know like you mentioned, that old habits have to die. Very, very, very good. We've heard all of that, but how do I actually go about and do it? So any tips on how I can foster innovation without, in simple practicable steps for my organization?
Well, thank you for all the kind words. Uh, look. One of the first aspects is, and I've seen this happening at least in 3 companies. These are all startups or still in a startup mode while they've been around for a while. And I've said this before, and you may find this fuzzy, but this is the real life. And yes, every complex problem starts with fuzzy front end. That the CEO, the leader, has to have that passion. Unless he has the passion and can ignite it in others, it wouldn't work. On the other hand, the fact, like I said, if your company did well, did something different in during the COVID times, please reflect back on what was the process followed and how can you replicate the process. You don't need to follow my process, whatever process you followed, but invariably, if you would have done well or you would have innovated during this period, you would have had your every problem there was taken as a first run problem, today's problem, and not tomorrow's, or we'll look at it. There was less PPTs and more doing. The fact was you were ready to pay the cost of failure, and you were not you were in such a hurry that you were not even stopping to crib about failure. You just moved on to the next part. So again, spoken differently, I would say rapid iteration, but rapid iteration doesn't really make that much of impact. What I just said, that during COVID, when you were innovating, you were just going at a fast pace. Okay, fine, this didn't work, so what is going to work next? Okay, we know that this doesn't work, so let's go find the next way to do it. The other aspect is that that many a times what we have learned is innovation doesn't really happen in the center of the organization. It happens in the periphery of the organizations, especially larger the organization, the truer this will become. That yes, you will have people, and we've seen that happen to CEOs where the CFOs is saying there is no money for us to hire X number of people or to chase this vision of yours. But CEO maintains steadfast and then broke that objection down into pieces of, so what is our problem? We have a problem of capacity and we have a problem of capability. After breaking that down, and then they started on both the engines of capacity and capability. That particular company during COVID made 50% more profit than they did in a year before, which didn't have COVID. They increased the revenue by 25%, solely being passionate and pushing through the idea that needs to be done and breaking it down. Somewhere, I also believe that breaking it down in the OKR way for the uninitiated, just breaking it down, just saying this extremely simply, is that, look, I am the CEO. This is what my strategy, this is what my vision was. This is what the overall strategy is. Now, Bala, you're responsible for marketing. This is your problem. You break it down into 10 steps that you're going to do to make sure this happens. And I'm here to support you through the process. So I think that's what I could come off at the drop of the hat, Mr. Pandey.
Okay, perfect. I think that helps. Yeah, Bala, you have.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, I'm all about thinking models and frameworks. So, and a lot of it is borrowed concepts, but it's also kind of consolidated from different thinkers. So this is, and take it for what it is. Based on my experience, I think for small to medium enterprises, there's a massive opportunity. Always a bigger opportunity than established large brands. Established large brands have laid a claim to a marketplace. They are in a somewhat of a position of what they're known for, and they need to keep delivering on that promise because they have an established thing that they're communicating to the marketplace. Small to medium enterprises and startups have this unique ability to really serve the consumers. And when I say serve the consumers, it's a very small group of consumers. So look at the marketplace and you would see, and think about it as a sheet of paper. And this will resonate with Shishir for what he was saying earlier. Most of the market is operating in the center of the sheet of the paper. That is, most of the market is serving an average consumer with an average demand, an average need, and so on. And what's going on in that space is there are a lot of similar Me Too alternatives in that center of this marketplace. So eventually it becomes somewhat of a commodity, because the only differentiating aspect when you have very, very similar products and service offerings, the only differentiating factor becomes price or your existing relationship, which is habit, right? You're used to buying a certain, I don't know, shampoo, not that I buy shampoo, but if you were to think of shampoo, you would keep going back to it. Even if there's a better product out there, it's harder because or some new product comes up with a heavily discounted price. You might say, okay, I'll shift, I'll switch, right? So that's the category in the center of the innovation happens on the edges of that sheet, right? Move away. And I'm not saying go to a different sheet because that's a new category. I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying stay within that sheet, the category you're serving, but move towards the edges. Towards the edges, there's always a smaller consumer group who's looking for a shampoo which is, I don't know, vegan. Again, I'm just ad-libbing over here. But there are some smaller consumers which the large conglomerate industrial powerhouse is not serving because it's not worth their while to go behind it. So that's where innovation happens. So think tangentially, go to the corners of that sheet. And once you've identified who that consumer is, that's where passion comes in. I mean, is the founder or whoever's coming for the really understands the consumer, has been passionate to find out that what the consumer needs are. So I think the easiest way to do that is talk to them.
Okay.
It's amazing how 3 to 5 conversations can kind of open up so many ideas.
Sure. And that's very interesting that you bring this up, both of you, because my next question is, to harness the benefits of both innovation and marketing, the organization needs to come together, right? What has been clearly established in your case, in what both of you have just said. The challenge that we've seen is, both these practices, be it innovation or be it marketing, is either left to the CEO to figure out and then tell the organization what to do, or is considered the responsibility of one particular function within the organization. So, if I were to let's say start with marketing, how do I break marketing to something that every function can contribute and respond to, right? Because eventually everybody would like to be a part of something been happening. Because one of the resistance that we've seen is, you designed a product, but then employees will have to then go into an induction program that this is the new product or service, etc., and this is how you service it. The sales team is then told this is how you'll sell it, etc., which is a very dated way of working. Right. In today's agile framework, it makes sense that even while creating a product, various stakeholders come together and design the product. That's something that we advocate in design thinking as well. Let everybody come together. and more the views, the better, right? Because eventually, once you've shaped up a product or a service, the functions are anyways going to come together as an organizational entity to serve it in their own capacity. So, Bala, what are your views on how can we get the whole organization together to a given marketing drive, and something that you've driven, if you can share from your examples as well.
Yeah, it's the problem is part political, right? Especially in large organizations, because I think there's always a core group of people who are just organically motivated to think about the consumer, develop, enhance, innovate, and things like that. It's just a state of any large organization. So it's the idea of how do you make that small group wider, slightly wider every time, right? So the way I would first bring the core group of people who are passionate about the idea. And that's the most important thing, selecting that initial core group in a larger corporation. In small to medium enterprises, that happens fairly easy because it's usually founder-led and people very quickly align towards a general objective. But in larger organizations, it becomes somewhat political and it's harder to make that contagious. But I think the idea is for larger organizations is bring this core group together from diverse areas. And it certainly should not be only marketing, because marketing, I believe, is everybody's problem. Because at the end of the day, marketing is serving the consumer and everyone's serving the consumer. That's what's paying for our salaries, our bills, and everything else. So bring that diverse group of people and let them know that they own this as a problem, as a challenge. And it's very important that, again, in my experience, pick the right people, pick people who have differing opinions, because it's so important to get that core group. Because once you bring that core group, even people with differing opinions over 1 or 2 or 3 days come quickly aligned around a common enemy. It is so important to get that common enemy and zero in on that. And once you have that, each one of them has a circle of influence. Then let them go and propagate that idea of the common enemy and build a product and innovate. And I know it sounds somewhat philosophical, but it really is that I've seen this play time and again in the small to medium to large enterprises, where you got to get the core group of people and selecting that core group of people who will help you spread the word about developing a product or enhancing a product.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Shishir. This is very interesting because this brings me to something that you've been advocating for almost as long as I remember. Is that change management is not just about publishing some manuals and telling people how to use it, right? So actually, if you look at it, and this is something that you practice very well in your work life and your consulting engagements as well, is how do you incubate change in that sense? Incubation always has to be at a small level, and then slowly use pollination or other techniques to make it spread far and wide. So your thoughts on how this can be utilized?
Bala said it partially. One of the not partially, Bala talked about it. One of the reasons I'm in quality was because I was seconded to that small core team. I was handpicked, selected in a small company, and I was moved to this team called Harness Innovation and Transformation. We were called the HIT team. I was the youngest fellow out there, the analyst, and then we had senior managers and stuff like that, and our leader then, who's now general manager for innovation with ICICI, made us go through the hoops and so on and so forth. So yes, that does work. The other one, Sushant, that definitely works is, sit on the floor. And look, I have sat on floors all my life, so I refer to floors. I can't be sat to the floors yet. But just sit on the floor, and if you observe, or you sit in the pantry and you observe, you would realize who your influencers are. You don't really need to make a map or check an email. There are actually tools available for you to figure out who your influencers are very methodically. But at a general level, go sit in your pantry, go sit on the floor. You will figure out who your influencers are. And those are the guys to catch first. Are they supposed to be caught together and given this spiel on how the word is going to change? No, because one of the reasons that they're popular is probably because they are a little bit cynical, a little bit sarcastic, and they make fun of a lot of things. So the idea is that you will have to catch them individually in their own comfort zones and have that chat. You will have to let go of. You can't call them to your office and try and influence them. That isn't going to cut. But once you sit down with them, and I've had those chats in client sites over coffees or whatever. And then try and understand where is this guy coming from, and how can I push this guy slowly along the curve. Because even as a consultant, half the time they're worried about being that the consultant has come, they will take my job. Of course, that's not the idea. If I wanted to take a job, I would have stayed in the job. So from a change management perspective, number one, find your influencers, have a chat with them, get them to turn. When they turn a lot of people. The influencer is not the team manager in most of the cases. It's probably the second guy, the guy who fights with you most, the guy who questions you most is the influencer. Find the guy, have a chat, have courage, involve the guy in further incubating the idea, or watering the germ of the idea to take it further. That probably would be step one in change management. And of course, like you said, when you're doing your workshop and stuff, bring people together.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. So the analogy that's bringing to my mind, hearing both of you speak, it's almost like from when you plant a seed, then seed grows slowly onto a shoot and then a tree. And you can expect pollination only after a certain time, which is when the larger spread of the same seed happens, right? It can be through a bee, through wind, or whatever mechanism of pollination that a given plant is more comfortable with. But if I use it in a corporate parlance, you germinate an idea, and the idea has to take shape of a tree. Nobody is very enthused by a seed except a farmer. And let that seed grow in a conducive environment, right? So that environment of incubation is what you spoke about. So that needs to happen. And once it grows to a tree, you figure out your influencers, or you figure out internet as a mechanism. Internet can be a parlance for wind, and you let that pollinate your idea onto other spheres. So your wind can also be your Slack or your Yammer within the organization. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Indeed.
Amazing, Pandey. You've been watching a lot of Nat Geo. You clearly have been watching the nature shows. The idea of how you brought the seed to a sapling to a tree. Yeah, amazing.
Indeed. And before we mistake, so there are two types of idea that we're talking about. When sometimes we don't separate between the two, there is an idea which is a solution, and there is an idea which is a challenge. Taking challenge as a seed is probably more difficult, but also more fruitful. So the idea is that, look, how do we become number one? That's the conversation. That's the idea to be sowed in, because once that idea, that passion has been sowed in, it'll germinate a lot of flowers, and continuing with the theory, a lot of corn cobs for that matter. But the fact remains that I'm very particular about not selling the solution, but selling the challenge.
Oh, interesting. We have a good question from Swati, and she's saying, Swati, I love your question for the fact that it resonates with how I look at things. And she says, influence are not really encouraged much. It's more of follow the boss. So any thoughts on how that change can be brought about, or if that is the setup that one is working in, how can they act as influencers?
Look, if influencer has to follow the boss, then boss hasn't realized the importance of an influencer, and probably, like we're saying, the number one bit that we started with was to change the old habits. And if we are in that kind of a situation where somebody thinks that they're influencer, however, the boss doesn't listen to them, and they are made to influence others because the boss said so. It's not a great situation to be in. Look, I think one can then make their own decisions from there on.
Okay, perfect. I think that makes sense. And thanks, Shishir, is what she says. Which is what I'm reading from the question box. So great. The other point that I would like to bring in is, and for the audience who's probably going to watch the recording or watching us live, is the fact that we've come up with a framework which is called Index, which is also called Innovation Index to expand it. Essentially, what it does is, as an organization, it is aimed to figure out what are the various facets which will lead to innovation, right? So, be it purpose, from purpose we move to strategy, strategy we move to enablers, and in all about a 30-minute broad thing in which it will give you a very, very decent dipstick of which are the focus areas. So does an organization need to focus on creating a very, very comprehensive strategy document which is aligned with the purpose? Does it need to work on people practices, or from a marketing perspective, are product and services innovative enough? If yes, is the organization seeking feedback and coming up with something? Is it utilizing the ecosystem? One of the very important aspects that we've realized from an SMB perspective is, if you're still playing the game of that, I will have the money and eventually I'll play big. You're trying to be in an 18th century mindset in a 22nd century game, right? The idea is, with the kind of leverage that partner ecosystems can give you, and just to give an example, like we are a consulting company. We are in discussions with various with some technology companies. How can we come together and create a comprehensive offering, right? So the idea is that technology company is looking at it, how can we come together and become the next Accenture, if you will, right? And why shouldn't we aspire on that? Why should we wait for the next 50 years to become Accenture, right? Today is the day and age of massive collaboration. The clients are looking for comprehensive solutions, so be it. And which is the point which Shishir and Bala raised earlier, that till such a time that a need is identified, what is it that I want to do? So to Shishir's point, which he just raised, when you're trying to look at an innovation perspective, don't look at a solution oriented innovation. Just be in the problem space. So our problem is, how do we grow bigger without really having a spend on resources, right? And that's the idea that we've germinated for a very long time. In fact, Arvind, that you see on your screen is because we were continuously trying to see what is it that we can do from a pure marketing perspective, and we're putting a thoughts. We should be shortly be releasing our own offerings on that space. So thank you. That's been very helpful. So that's a description that we have. My the questions as we are heading towards the end of it is, Shishir, you want to touch upon slightly on the aligned organization space and how that fosters innovation, our standard discovery theory that we use for all our clients. You want to expand on that, and then I'll come to Arvind on my next question.
Well, the aligned organization model primarily questions or starts with, and we do that even with our diagnostics or discovery conversations with companies, is what is your purpose? What do you want to be when you grow up? Where are you heading to? What's your vision? Once you've understood that, and then you move to strategy to try and understand, is your strategy aligned? And then you move to resources and other enablers, and eventually the management systems and structures, that are they all in line? Our view is your purpose can do a lot of good for you. It's not English, shouldn't be treated as that. If you don't have a belief and you just want to be a Me Too product, great, good luck. But the fact is that if you have a purpose and you want to become something, be it Accenture or be it some other company that becomes that example like an Accenture at a point in time, then you have to have a purpose, and you need to align your activities, strategy, people, process, culture, leadership, management systems and structure around it.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Arvind, I remember a couple of weeks back when we were doing our discussion on the 2-inch drill bit, right? So we were discussing, working in a commoditized space versus specializing. Now, from a customer's perspective, it's a 2-inch drill bit, right? From a founder's perspective, it's probably his or her heart and soul. So how does how can a founder reconcile to the fact and actually start looking at their product from a customer's perspective? Because that's the start point in my view to bring about any relevant change.
Yeah, as a founder, I would step slightly even further back. There is no product.
Okay.
Right? So you don't need to have a product. You need to first understand the problem, because the customer is not going to jump over the hoops and hills to buy a product. They're buying a solution for a problem that they have, which they think is big enough to invest time, money, and effort in getting that right. So if the product is there and you're trying to fit into the marketplace, that's already you're already down the incorrect path. I mean, it can be corrected, but it's the incorrect path. The way I would think about it is step back, first identify what you are curious about and what you are passionate about as a founder. And it doesn't have to be a product. It's just the idea. I mean, it could be anything, but generally what you're curious and passionate about. And the way I define it is curiosity is you look up for information, you're trying to understand, you're trying to search something on the internet once, that's curiosity. When you do it time and again and for 10 days, 20 days, 2 months, 3 years, that's passion, right? That's the difference between curiosity and passion. So once you know as a founder, you're passionate about this, find a group of people that, and there always is, are like you. There are always a group of people who are just like you, however unique you are. And once you find that group, and it's just usually a small or sizable, it doesn't matter, but find that group of people and speak with them. What is their pain point? What is it that they, and that's when a idea of a product would really conceptualize. So that's the starting point. Find this minimum viable market, MVM, and then develop a minimum viable product for them. Because once you do that, and you do that time and again, you start scaling up from early adoption to the entire adoption cycle curve. And that's how, and you can replicate it for different consumer groups, different marketplaces, and continue to develop and enhance your product. But that's down the line. I think find your minimum viable marketplace or consumers who want that to be solved, and then position your minimum viable or create your minimum viable product for that.
Okay, perfect, gentlemen. It's been a great conversation, and we're almost out of time. Just a couple of minutes left. So, audience, if there are questions, feel free to put them of what we want to, or what you want to ask. In case you're watching the recording and you have questions, please use the comment section, and we'll get to answering that. So Swati has a question again, which I'll open to both of you as a concluding remarks. What is innovation?
Well, I think I started with that, so I'll probably end with that, and I'll do a shorter one. Innovation is creating new value, and here Arvind would agree, new value whichever way, incremental or a larger way. And as long as you figure it out, and again, talking to marketing speak, if I can, value has to be defined from a customer's perspective and nobody else's. So as long as you can create new value, that's innovation for me.
Arvind,
yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. I think it's hard to not do so. The way I would define innovation is, again, serving a small group of customers in an incremental way. It could be 10 people, it could be 22,000, doesn't matter.
Okay, perfect. Swati, I hope you got two perspectives which are seemingly apart, but using it at going back to my plant analogy, somehow I'm enthused with it today. You may see it changing in subsequent ones. Is these are two branches connected to the same tree. So just dwell on that, and with that we'll take your leave. Thank you, gentlemen, and thanks to all our guests for joining us. We'll be back soon with the next episode on innovation and marketing, and we'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.